Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Okay. Hey, guys. TLDR News EU. 403,843 votes. Where's the line between West and Eastern Europe? I always assumed it was just former Soviet bloc countries were Eastern Europe and former American bloc, if you want to call it that, countries were Western. And then even after the Soviet Union fell, it just sort of stuck. I consider, like, Prague the absolute center of Europe. So if you're east of Prague, I would say you're Eastern. And if you're west, I have no idea, guys. Just let's find out. People voted, I guess.
Europe might not be the biggest continent, but it's home to a vast array of people and cultures from, depending on how you count it, about 46 different countries. With that many countries, it's often useful to group them together when discussing them. The Mediterranean nations, or maybe the Nordic countries, or maybe even the less geographical Frugal Four. But the most common way of splitting is a simple east-west.
Guys, like, for Eastern and Western United States, I would say if you're west of the Mississippi, you're Western. If you're east of the Mississippi, you're Eastern. But I know that East and West Europe has more than, the term has more than just a geographical meaning, right? So I know it's not a great comparison, but, you know.
Four. But the most common way of splitting, or maybe even the less geographical Frugal Four. But the most common way of splitting is a simple east-west. But where do you draw the line? Especially considering both terms hold some serious baggage. So let's discuss the split, if there really is a geographical divide in Europe, and where the line ought to be drawn. Before we get going, a quick thank you to everyone who's watched the channel in 2021 and helped us more than double in size. But if you're not yet subscribed, hit the button to get more from us in 2022 and beyond. When it comes to drawing a dividing line, unfortunately for us, there's no clear definition of Eastern and Western European. So we thought we'd ask our audience to see what they think. Fortunately, 8,779 TLDR viewers headed to our poll, casting a total of about 400,000 rankings. We asked them to tell us if they thought each European country was in the East or the West, and having aggregated that data, we can now draw a line that divides the two sides. It's worth saying, though, that we did actually have two different surveys. In one poll, we asked people if the nations were in the East or the West without any geographical hints, with us explicitly telling them not to look at maps. In the other poll, though, we gave voters maps, marking exactly the country they were assessing. We did this as we were interested if knowing the exact geographical location of the countries would impact people's intuitions. Anyway,
I feel like I'm pretty good at geography. It's one of the few things I can say I think I'm pretty good at, especially countries. So, I feel like that wouldn't affect me that much either.
Before we get into that data, let's draw the line. Some countries very clearly fell on one side of the line or the other. More than 99% of people put France, Spain, Germany, Italy, Ireland, Iceland, the UK, Denmark, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg in the West. And all of these other places Portugal had more than 90% West votes. On the other side, though, it was a little less cut and dry.
I think that's pretty good.
On the other side, though, it was a little less cut and dry. 13 countries were almost unanimously voted as Western, but only one country got more than 99% East, Belarus. Getting more than 90% East, though, we had Ukraine, Moldova, Bulgaria, Turkey, Romania, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Albania, North Macedonia, and Kosovo. So we don't
understand why. I understand why Greece didn't get the same amount. When it gets to the super southern Europe and super northern Europe, I think the west-east divide gets a little hazy. But yeah, okay.
Don't have a clear line yet. We will do by the end of the video, but there is already a clear divide, despite the fact that we've only coloured where the audience was in at least 90% agreement. It's clear geography is a factor here. I mean, those marked in the West are clearly in the West, and vice versa. But it's not the only factor at play. History and culture are other fairly clear dividing lines, with fairly different traditional cultural practices on each side of the continent. For example, when we look at the level of religiousness for each country, we can see that many, but not all of the most religious countries, fall on the eastern side geographically. It's even clearer when we look at democracy though, with many of the stronger democracies falling on the western side. What about social attitudes? Well, this one shows us each country's feelings on LGBTQ+ rights, with a pretty clear east-west split. Economics.
Like, I would not consider Turkey an Eastern or Western European country just because I think culturally they're very different from the rest of Europe. Like, I would put like a... Yeah, I don't know.
It's probably the easiest to measure. A pretty clear east-west split. Economics is probably the easiest to measure though, with, again, a fairly clear split when it comes to GDP per capita of European nations. This east-west divide isn't strictly true though. There are some countries, like Portugal and Ireland, which are firmly Western geographically, but cross the line on some issues socially, like LGBT rights in Ireland, GDP in Portugal, and the importance of religion in both. Also, the East clearly isn't a homogeneous zone. Some see Russia as a threat, others as a friend. Some are in the Eurozone and others aren't. Some are in Schengen and others aren't. Some think of themselves as more northern and Nordic, while others have stronger V4 and Balkan identities. That's what makes drawing a line so difficult. Besides straight geography, there's no clear definition of what makes a country feel intuitively Eastern or Western. And when Eastern is often used as a synonym for poorer, less progressive, and less democratic, it's easy to understand why some would want to shrug off the label. In fact, it's that stigma that might explain why only one country was almost unanimously voted Eastern in the same way all of these were almost unanimously voted Western. People, especially those living in these countries and areas, are cautious of the Eastern Europe label. And for good reason, with it often hijacked by populists across the continent. In fact, if we look at the countries we've marked as Eastern European thus far, and separate out the people voting from those countries, the average score they receive is consistently more Eastern than the label they give themselves, with every country on this list thinking of themselves as less Eastern than the continent as a whole sees them.
Makes sense.
That said, let's fill in some gaps and see where the line is drawn by our audience. 89% of people put Montenegro in the east, and 87% put Lithuania and Latvia in the east, slightly more than the 79% Eastern scored by their northern neighbour of Estonia. Both Poland and Hungary came in at 85% Eastern, while Slovakia was 84% and similarly named Slovenia was 66%.
See, Slovenia, I think, is... Yeah, they said 66, yeah.
Despite being significant...
Like, Slovenia and Poland and Czech Republic seem to be, like, the countries where you really got to start to ask the question, at least. I guess.
Further east, Cyprus scored the same as Croatia, with 73% of people putting them in the east. The very close nations, though, were the Czech Republic, Greece, and Finland, with the latter being the only ones sneaking into the west. Despite being pretty far east geographically, its Nordic connections pulled Finland west in your eyes. Greece and Czechia both slipped the other way, though, with them scoring 58 and 59% Eastern respectively.
I feel like I would have scored very similarly to I mean, and what do I know, guys? Like, I don't want to, I'm not an expert, but my personal, if I were to take the survey, probably would have been extremely similar to how this turned out.
Respectively, With all of these countries coloured in then, we can finally draw a line dividing the continent based on your votes. But does this line make sense? Well, geographically, kind of. It definitely bends a fair bit to let Finland into the west, but all in all, it's a pretty geographically accurate line. But what about the factors we mentioned earlier, though? Well, it does seem that the line drawn does fit fairly well with the statistics we discussed earlier, such as GDP per capita, strength of religious convictions, LGBTQ+ rights, and democracy. But as we discussed earlier, this isn't a straight geographic split on any issue, and potentially the label Eastern European isn't even all that useful. Finally though, as I mentioned at the start, we showed some respondents a map when they were ranking, while others were told not to consult maps. For a lot of countries, seeing the map made no difference. Generally, those pretty clearly on one side or the other, with the exception of the Czech Republic here. The other countries, though, saw a more notable shift between map viewers and non-map viewers. Now, the ones in blue, people rated as more Western once they'd seen the map, and those in orange, people thought of as more Eastern when they saw their real geographical location.
All right, so Finland makes a lot of sense when they look at the map, like, ooh, they're really over there. How did Greece get the more Western when they saw the map? That makes no sense, because I get, like, not seeing the map, you could see Greece as more west. But when you see the map, it's clearly in the east. And yet more people, when they saw the map, changed their mind a bit.
People thought of as more Eastern when they saw their real geographical location.
That's interesting.
The biggest shift was for Malta, which saw a 7 percentage point shift between those seeing and not seeing the map, with map viewers ranking it as more Western than non-map viewers.
Cyprus.
Notably though, 2.7% of respondents very honestly admitted that they didn't know enough about Malta to judge it. And this seems to track across many of the other countries.
That's, by the way, me with a lot of these countries, okay? So I don't want to come across as if I know enough.
That had big shifts depending on whether people saw the map or not. All of these places had at least 2% of people said they didn't know them. And many of them are also the ones that saw the biggest difference between map and non-map results. These countries also tend to swing further west when people are shown the maps and find out their real location, suggesting that if people don't really know a country that well and didn't have a map to use as guidance, they'd put it further in the east. Notable exception here is Greece, though.
That's fascinating. Well, not fascinating, but interesting. Like, if I don't know it that well, then it's probably an Eastern European country.
With those seeing the map rating it as 5 percentage points more Western than those who didn't see the map.
How does that make any sense?
Which is a little odd, considering the map quite clearly shows Greece on the eastern side.
I immediately saw that, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, I don't really know where Greece is, but they seem kind of Eastern. Look at the map. Clearly in the east. Oh, actually, no, west.
Geographically. But who knows? Comment your theories down below. Oh, and before we go, I know you're wondering, here are the countries ranked by the number of people who didn't know them, with San Marino being the least known country on the list.
That many people didn't know what Turkey was? I feel like Turkey is just such a noble country because it's like that country that... It's like with Hungary. It's like, oh, that's funny. It's called Hungary. It's like, oh, it's called Turkey. Moldova makes sense. Are they counting Kosovo? Is that? Montenegro. San Marino makes sense. Andorra makes sense. Macedonia. North Macedonia, right? Yeah, how does that make... More people knew what Bosnia was than Turkey. More people knew what Monaco was than Turkey.
People who didn't know them, with San Marino being the least known country on the list. Anyway, here's the overall data and the final line. Do you agree with our audience's verdict?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I like that because Greece is also a wild card in my mind. I just don't know. None. It's just Greece, okay? Turkey, I wouldn't even... I would not think as Eastern European. I wouldn't think of it as Western European either. I would think of it as, like, asterisk. But yeah, Greece makes sense. I'm surprised the Czech Republic is so white. Like, I don't have the same quarrel with the Czech Republic as I do... Actually... Shoot. Maybe I do. I immediately want to put it in Eastern Europe, but I also know it's... I feel like the Czech Republic would be the point where, like, you see a lot, like, the transition between Western and Eastern Europe, and where you would likely see a lot of similar, like, cultural, like, buildings and whatnot. But yeah, I would absolutely assume the same as the poll did.
Overall data and the final line.
It was a really cool video, guys. I gotta pee really bad. I know you probably don't want to hear that. I hope you're all doing well. I would love to hear any of your comments, see any of your comments, and if you think I'm wrong anywhere, or if I made an assumption I shouldn't have, love to see it, encourage it, and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye.